Good morning, everybody, and congratulations for making it to Friday. Good to see a few familiar faces and some new faces in the crowd. When we were planning this event, I thought, as a producer myself, I thought, it's really important for us as researchers and extension and public-facing people in industry that we stay connected to the boots on the ground and the people, who are there feeding America. And so I had the idea to put together a producer panel. And had a lot of help from, I'd like to recognize Grace Vahey, who's in the room from National Cattlemen's Beef Association, who helped put this group together. But they are a group of producers throughout the country, from Utah, Florida, Wisconsin, and North Dakota, who are past Environmental Steward Award winners. So I thought it would be great to hear their story, to hear their challenges, to hear their successes, so that we, can help to aid our understanding in what's going on and how we can look forward to the future. So if I could have my producers join me on stage, we'll start by letting them tell you a little bit about their story, and then after that we'll open the field to questions so that you guys can ask questions to learn a little bit more about them and some of their challenges. I have John Ferry here from Utah. I have Gene Lawless from Florida. I have Mr. Jerry Huth from Wisconsin, and I have Mr. Jerry Doan from North Dakota. So I think we're going to start with Mr. Ferry. Can tell you a little bit about his place. Do you want to start the video? Yeah, okay. Could we start the video, please? You want to just let me do it? Yep. You can use that right there. Yep.
Sustainability is a process, and whatever happens tomorrow will be affected by what I do today. But if you are wise and listen to the land, it'll tell you what it can do. I'm John Ferry, J.Y. Ferry & Son, located here in northern Utah on the Bear River Delta. My great-grandfather immigrated here right after the railroad at the turn of the century. I'm fourth generation. I operate on our ranch with my brother, and I have a son who's coming along on the fifth generation.
Sustainability is a daily goal for our family, and sustainability to me means managing the resource in such a way that it's here for generations.
Our cow herd is wetland based, and the vegetation that's in the wetland is varied, but the one that's a challenge is a species called Phragmites. Phragmites is an invasive weed. And the reason it's invasive because you cannot naturally control it. Historically, Phragmites has been controlled by herbicides, by spraying it to kill it. But we discovered in our own operation that we can control Phragmites by grazing it.
For when you spray it, you kill everything. When you burn it, you kill everything. When you drought it, you kill everything. And we have been places where they haven't had cattle ever, and it is just a thick jungle mess of Phragmites. You can't walk through it. There's no habitat whatsoever for anything, for any birds, or any ducks, or geese, or anything. And that's where we come in, because you have cattle that are trained, recognize what the plant is. They will graze on it, select it out, and all of a sudden you are turning a disaster into a grazing opportunity.
Phragmites pushes the birds out and the wildlife species that would traditionally use these wetland areas. And so by grazing it, what you do is you're pushing back. You're preventing it from spreading, because there are literally thousands of cattle now in the valley grazing on Phragmites every summer. And what we've been able to show is that done the right way, proper management of cattle in these wetland areas actually improves the wetlands.
We take it serious, the responsibility we have for the environment, for the legacy of the past, and for the future of this operation.
I'm constantly looking for opportunities to improve, to enhance what we have, because we have a beautiful resource here, and I love it. This is irreplaceable.
Every day I'm out on this place, I look at it and say, this is what my grandfather started. And I need to be able to proudly say that I did the best I could, took what was here, improved upon it, and passed it on.
If I could leave on a bumper sticker for you to take home with everything that you have tried to absorb this last 5 or 6 or however many days, it would be this: that as you are involved in forage production, grasslands, the habitat, the ecological benefit of what all of this great resource is all about, is that as a grazer, that I'm here to help you accomplish your goal. One of the things that I try to tell, especially to the wildlife community, that I understand what you are trying to accomplish. Those resource managers, they will tell me, especially where we're at, where we border on our side of the river, the Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge. And we are located right there. It's kind of an oasis right in the middle of the desert. And I work closely with Ducks Unlimited, Delta Waterfowl, and with also the state and federal refuges. And we have this flyway, Pacific Flyway, where birds will migrate literally by the millions. And there are shorebirds, there are ducks, geese, swans. All of those things come through, and they need a place to rest as they migrate from one end of the continent to the other. And so here they come to us. And my wildlife resource managers tell me all the time, you need to realize that I see everything, this is they're speaking to me, I see everything through the eyes of a duck. And that's true. And I recognize that. I say, well, let me help you accomplish your goal. And that's where grazing comes in. Because grazing in wetlands has never been something that has been widely accepted. And they say, well, why do we want cows on our marshes? Well, I'm here to help you. And one of the problems they have is this plant called Phragmites. And if you are involved at all with the waterfowl, Phragmites is a hiss and a byword. It totally will destroy and take over a wetlands. Totally. That stuff will get, if it looks like Sudan grass on steroids is what it looks like. Okay, it gets 10 feet tall, and it'll be so thick that you cannot walk through it. And totally will, any open water, it will just destroy your wetlands. But it's also, in the vegetative state, it's about 12 to 13% crude protein. And it's highly palatable. If you have cattle that understand what that is, they will select that over your established grasses, your brome grasses, your wheat grasses. They'll go right to the frag. And pretty soon what we are doing is we're putting grazing pressure on those plants. And sustainability, another way of saying sustainability is independence, where something will perpetuate itself, favorably perpetuate itself without added inputs. It becomes independent from outside modifications of what you're trying to do and control. For when I have taken the frag out and I start seeing some of the more suitable plants establish themselves, like round stem, alkali, salicornia, alkali bulrush, some of those things that the ducks need and want, then I have achieved sustainability. The problem they have with glyphosate spraying is, like I said in the video, when you spray, it kills everything that's vegetative, including the stuff that you don't want to kill. And because of the aggressive nature of the Phragmites, you're actually facilitating an increase of growth, which is not sustainable at all. And so that's our message, and that's what I want to say to you, that I'm here to help you accomplish your goal. I say that to my wildlife people, And we have discovered that synergy that I can fit into their program. Hence, that's why we have the success that we do.
That was great. I really enjoyed that slideshow, and I'm a little jealous that I don't live in Utah. Next, we have Mr. Gene Lawless from Florida. Gene, you want me to start that slideshow? Yeah, you can go ahead and start that next.
Yeah, I'm Gene Lawless. I'm from Lake Placid, Florida. Unlike my other panelists, I don't own the land. These are multi-generational guys here, and I think that's aspirational. You know, I think that is a good deal. And as you see, the love of the land. My uniqueness is I don't own land. I manage land for a company called Archibald Expedition. It's a family-owned foundation. And they bought Buck Island Ranch 4 years ago, but we leased it for 30 years. And the premise of that was not for production agriculture. It was for environmental research. So down in Florida, we've always been a little unique in that regulations have always been upon us in Florida because we've always been a little more populated with people than we have been with cattle ranch. But agriculture is, you know, our second economic leading industry in the state. Actually, right now, tourism's back up, and then, of course, building's up. But agriculture is still there. So learning how to ranch sustainably in a thing. Some of y'all may have seen these slides because I kind of just steal from one slideshow to the next. You can roll to the next slide. Slide thing. Is this it?
Yeah, that's right.
Where do I point? Oh. So somebody might have seen that. I got a disclaimer. I don't make these slideshows. I got a gal that works for me, and she does a good job, and she always puts things in there that I am no expert. I always say I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. I know a little about a lot that gets me in trouble in them all. So real fast, I'm gonna get through these. A little bit about me. I am a sixth generation Florida boy. I'm almost one generation removed from my food source. And what I mean by that is, of course, my family went into construction. They left the farm, they left the ranch. I'm married, I have 3 kids. I have 9 grandchildren now, which my grandchildren will be the 8th generation Floridians. Both my families came from farming. My dad family come out of South Georgia. They grew tobacco and cotton, but then when they moved to Florida, they grazed cattle and hogs, and that was in a communal situation. I always asked them, Dad, why didn't you buy land? He said, number one, we couldn't afford it, and the other, we had access to it, so why would we buy it? But anyway, so I grew up in an agricultural, a rural area of Florida, which is not rural anymore. So I had the opportunity to grow up and work in orange groves, work on cattle ranches. So I started riding horses and things, kind of fell in love with it. And as I went through it, I worked for a family for about 10 years, all through my youth. And so I got this job opportunity at the place I work today. And I felt that was my way to give back to those ranching families and the folks in agriculture, that if we could do some research like y'all do to maybe give them a light on some of the things that they are already doing and share that with the general public. So what we do is our mission at Archibald Biology is, of course, the scientific knowledge needed to protect life, lands, and waters of the heart of Florida and beyond. You can see just some things there. We do a lot of educational stuff. We do a lot with wildlife. One of our new pushes is with, of course, carbon sequestration, soils, water, the whole 9 yards. So just a little bit about Archibald. It was founded in 1937. The station was put in place in 41. As far as Buck Island Ranch is concerned, we trace it all the way back to 1840 as a ranch, and that ranch just under different ownership. As I've already mentioned, we bought the ranch in 2018, but the premise of, again, this is a full-scale working cattle ranch. And the one thing that we always wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that it was a full-scale working operation, so the research that was conducted would have validity on what they were doing. not just come in and put for science into it and say, this is what we're going to do. We put the operations on top of the research and then interweave them. Just some awards that we've got. We never won the national award. We did win the Southeastern Environmental Stewardship Award back a couple of years back, and then 2018 we won the Sustainable Rancher Award from Audubon Society down in Florida. So where do we work? If you look there, we always say from the ridge. If you see, there's a ridge of Florida that runs 135 miles. It's the spine of Florida. If you went back, they say 10,000 years ago, it was the only piece out of the water. So we say we work from the ridge, and you can see the ranch, to the river, to the reef. And so we work basically across a lot of different places, a lot of different ranch lands, conserved land and working lands. So this is us. We're 20,000 acres. We have what we call a reserve. We do use cattle there. Cattle is there, but the premise is that is put it back somewhat in its natural state. Cow will be the tool. In Florida, you'll see that then we have Archibald, which is 5,200 acres of that Lake Wales Ridge. There's no cattle on that. It's not cattle country. It's sand. And it's palmettos and gopher tortoises and a lot of unique species that don't exist anywhere else in the world. Then, of course, 10,500 acre cattle ranch. We also are part of LTAR, Long-Term Agricultural Research, with the USDA, one of 18 sites across the United States. So how do we manage the land? Water, fire. We try to limit our mechanical and chemical treatments. And then, of course, cattle is the number one tool for our grazing of our lands. So if you look at Florida, it's real unique. I told the gentleman this morning, we're kind of the part of the United States that kind of hangs off down there, and we're kind of sometimes outside of what's going on in the rest of the United States. But you can see there's a lot of cattle in Florida. And you can see right there, we're kind of in that belt right there where there's 6 counties that carry most of the cattle in Florida. We always say there's 1 million cows. It used to be 1 million people back in the 50s. Today it's a little less than 1 million cows and about 23.5 million people and 126 million visitors on any given year. Exclude COVID type situations. But you can kind of see water is a big thing in our state. So we manage water, and by managing water, we hold water up on our ranch now, and that's a payment for environmental services. It's just another income for us. We have 5 water management districts across, and when we started that, we had ranchers and that said we'd flood the ranch and this, that, and the other, but the demand on our water with 23 million people, it's all about how much, and most people don't want it on their feet. I'll walk to my house during the summer months and usually have about 6 inches of water getting to my door. But it would have been like that anyway. So and then we burn. So that's part of our ecology. Fire is very important for us in Florida because we're one of the lightning capitals of the world, and what we found through the research. So what we do with our fire now is we're trying to study it to look at, instead of going in and burning whole pastures, we do some spot burning. And what they've been finding there in our rotational grazing, that if we burn a third of a pasture, you draw the cattle to those areas, and they're getting real good positive results on the nutritional values, the proteins and all that on those areas a year and 2 out down the road. So versus just burning one whole block. So you can kind of see there why patch burn. And then, of course, some mechanical treatments and things such as that. But again, the cattle are our ultimate tool. We have 10,000, we graze 14,000 acres, we got 3,000 head on it. So one might ask, how do they impact the environment? Well, through the studies that we've seen, we're about 45% improved, what I call improved pastures or tame grasses. We're introduced grasses like Herbathia, Bahia grass, star grasses, grasses that came from all over the world that we grow. It'll grow in Florida no matter what. It just seems we got an environment that grows everything from pythons to grasses and other woody plants. but we have about 45. But then in our native range, which is about 55 to 60% of our ranch, we see that we have 485 species. I think it's actually 504 now. And 85% of those plants are native species. And so when you tell people that, they look at you and you go, and you have 3,000 cows. Well, when you go out on 10,000 acres, 3,000 cows ain't much in how we move them and manipulate them. So just kind of clean the grass cycle. We graze. We don't have an intensified grazing program. We try to rotate on a 3 pasture, 21-day interval. So if you look at that, you're in one pasture 21 days. We just put more cows in a pasture, and then we move them in that manner. Labor is one of our issues these days, and finding cowboys is getting tougher. We have a lot of partners that we work with. And then at the end of the day, I think that we just all got to keep getting up with faith and hope, show up with commitment, participate with actions, and never give up on unity. So the things that y'all do help us, but as Mr. John already said, is y'all need us too. So let's work together to accomplish the things that we all want, and that's open space, because I believe open space is what keeps our society somewhat civil. I'll say that until I'm down. And cattle is a tool and to keep these open spaces. I think that's it. Thank you very much. Those are cracker cows, so that's just a little, so that's not our whole cow herd.
Next up, we have Mr. Jerry Huth from Oakfield, Wisconsin. Mr. Jerry. Clicker if you need it. Is it a video?
It's a video.
Yeah. Would you start our video, please, sir?
We are so appreciative that the good Lord has given us the opportunity to manage a little bit of His creation for a short period of time. And I'm going to manage it to the best of my ability, and I'm also going to share what I know about this land to the next generation. I'm Jerry Huth, owner and operator of Huth Polled Herefords here in Oakfield, Wisconsin, along with S&H Livestock Enterprises, LLC, which is a partnership between myself and Josh Scharf.
I started working out here back in high school, even grade school, putting up hay for Jerry. After college, Jerry needed the help on the farm, and I loved being out here, so we formed this partnership.
We just worked out a deal where we can start incorporating Josh into this operation to get some growth and keep on going to take over from this old fella. Our farm is approximately 1 mile north of the Horicon Marsh, which is one of the largest marsh systems in the United States. The challenges that we face on that is containing the animals so their runoff does not get into the streams that go into the marsh. We are very sensitive on having grass buffer strips that can absorb any runoff from the fields or from the cattle.
This land is our business, and that's why we take care of it. We talk about limiting erosion. You don't want phosphates going into your water source. Well, one way to do that is to increase the forage density and limit that erosion. You're also sequestering carbon while you're doing that. And clean water benefits wildlife, it benefits cattle, it benefits humans.
We were one of the first people to start grazing public lands in Wisconsin.
When we first took the cattle out there, it was woody vegetation that was over my head, almost over the top of a tractor. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources was burning. They were spraying chemicals, and now they have not done that a single time since we've had cattle out there. After the first year, you could start to see the grasses pop through. There was a lot of clover, a lot of legumes that popped through, things that are desirable for cattle, but also desirable for wildlife.
It has been a great example of how people can work in conjunction with a number of different agencies, federal and state, to create beneficial land for the livestock and for the wildlife.
The proudest moment that I have is when I see my kids come out here and enjoy what I'm working hard for, and knowing that how we're doing it allows them to do the same thing in the future.
The fire has not gone out for me to keep on trying to learn something a little different, to do a little bit better job. And it is our responsibility to maintain this land and try to make it better for the future generations.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the International Grasslands Conference for inviting us here. This is the first conference that I made for the International Grasslands. The only thing I could relate to it is sort of similar to the Beef Improvement Federation conferences that I like to go to, but this thing is on steroids. My goodness gracious, I was sitting in those sessions yesterday, and bang, 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 you're getting stuff thrown at you from all different directions. It's been very interesting and very informative, and you guys are doing some great work. You know, we have a diversity in the panel. I think you're going to catch it. I'm the small guy up here. I'm talking about cattle numbers, obviously, not physical size. But, you know, last night we were visiting a little bit with Gene and Jeff, and they were making fun of my accent. And I said, man, I don't think I have an accent. He said, just keep on talking, buddy. You're from Wisconsin, you know. So, you know, this is, you know, the diversity of cattle operations in America is amazing. You know, there's 739,000 of us out there, and we're raising somewhere around 29 million head of cows. That's only average of 44 cows per producer. You got some of the larger producers right here in the country, and it's a great diversity, and we have to rely on the academia to keep on supplying us some information so we can make some smart decisions. I want to give a couple shout outs, especially in this video about grazing public land. Mark Krenz from the University of Wisconsin, in his session yesterday, referred to what we're doing here a little bit, and the benefits for getting rid of that woody vegetation. And what was really striking in Mark's discussion yesterday is the cost to rectify the problems once woody vegetation comes in and starts invading grasslands. And cattle do it very well on keeping things in check. I want to give also a good shout out to the NRCS. Without their collaborative work with us on this, you know, when we got this public land, we went to the NRCS and they provided us with some equip funds. They also helped us design the system, and we are really blessed in America that we have the NRCS to be working with us. What the video was taken was last July. That's what Wisconsin looks like in July. We were about halfway done in our AI season. We have a 60-day breeding season up there, and that was halfway done, which incorporates, which translates to calving starting April 20th. We calve for about a 45, 50-day season. And of course, halfway through our first 20 days, we had a snowstorm. So we have a varied environment up there. These cattle they're outside all the time. The temperature can get down to a negative 20 in the winter, negative 30, up to about 100 degrees in the summertime. So it's a varied climate, but cattle can handle it really well. Again, it's been an honor to be here. You guys are doing some good work here. And again, it's a pleasure to be with these distinguished gentlemen. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jerry. That was really enjoyable. I imagine those scenes from the summertime don't necessarily reflect what it looks like in January.
I'm trying to hire on the G into something in the wintertime.
That's right. I tell people I wish I was smart enough not to figure out how to live in Georgia in the summertime, but I'm still working on that. Last, we have Mr. Jerry Doan from McKenzie, North Dakota. Mr. Doan. You can just, well, if you want to walk around. Yeah, I'm going to walk around. Yep. But you turn this on. Try, it's the button right there. Yep.
Can you hear me?
Try it the other way. Yep.
There. Well, thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody. It's really been great to be here. I've been here a few days, and so I've met a lot of great people, and the tours were awesome. I really appreciate all the work everybody that put this together did, because it was really fun. I never been to this part of the country, and I really enjoyed it. See if I can run this thing. I'm up there in North Dakota, just on the east side of the Missouri River. Hey, I really appreciate 2 or 3 you came up to me this morning and you either heard me speak somewhere or you've been to the ranch, so I got to be honest here this morning now, I guess. And I've got my wife here with me too, and she'll dang sure keep me honest. She is the glue that holds this whole operation together. But my great-grandfather was a Canadian citizen, and he came down out of Canada in 1880 and then homesteaded in what was still then Dakota Territory. And I have to always think back to that. They lived in a sod house just trying to stay warm and put food on the table. We think we have it tough. We don't have a freaking clue, you know, and so I remind myself of that all the time, and it's the heritage that keeps us going, and we're pretty proud of that. This is my family, and I'm a bit odd in that I have 4 kids. They all went off to college across this country and worked somewhere, and all ended up back in North Dakota and wanted to be a part of agriculture. That's a little crazy. And my daughter, who's there, is not directly involved, but helps all she can and wants to be a part of it. All 3 boys came back, and I'll finish this little presentation up with how we tried to make that work. But you can see my wife, Renee, who's here with me, like I said, next to me there. This was what North Dakota was this winter. It was damn ugly. We had over 100 inches of snow. We had 70 below wind chills, and there was a lot of cattle lost. Those old cows couldn't take it. I don't care how much you fed them. We were feeding 50 big round bales a day and couldn't keep cows alive. That's crazy for a guy who brags that my goal is to never feed a bale of hay to a cow in the northern plains. But this is actually, we've got a kind of a feeding area 4.5 miles away. I plowed that road 3 weeks straight because the county never got there. And one day the county showed up and they let me go first. And I'm like, my God, I got a loader. You got a big plow, and what am I doing in front? But it's kind of crazy. And so it was a humbling year for us. Let's say that. This is what it's about on our place. This was my youngest grandchild. We've got a dozen of them now, but we just had twins born. And little Jordy there, he's quite the little cowboy. And can we regen our natural resources and protect our legacy for this? Because quite honestly, we're losing a lot of these ranches, and I don't want that to happen. And so every day when I look at him, it's what I'm about. We're a holistically managed operation. I graduated from North Dakota State, but I took my holistic training from Savory himself. And those of you that know him, he's very opinionated, actually hard to learn from. I went through it another time or two, but the principles are what changed how we do things. We're a regenerative place. We're regenerating our natural resources to what they hopefully were. I don't like the term sustainable, because why would I want to sustain something that's degraded? And our 2 major goals, and I don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but we generally miss them in agriculture. It's bring profitability back, and then improve our quality of life. Because for half of my life, I worked my hind end off too and didn't really enjoy it all that much, but I've changed that. And then for half my life, I just accepted we aren't going to make any money because we just accept that. And I'm tired of that, and we don't do that anymore either. So, and you guys, this is a grazing conference. You've seen all kinds of stuff. But we're fairly high intense. We're not mob grazers by any means, but we're pretty high intense graze. We move cattle every 1 to 7 days. We've got 100 and some pastures that we're moving through, and we can polywire something if we want to. Short duration, high animal impact, long rest and recovery periods. What made the grasslands in the Great Plains? It was those massive herds of buffalo, bison if you want to get technical, but in our area, the Indians named everything after buffalo. And so I always have fun arguing. I get it, buffalo is not a term that's true in North America, and yet it's the National Buffalo Association. It's the town of Buffalo and all that. Anyway, just a little fun with that. But if you read Lewis and Clark's journals when they came up to Dakota Territory, or it wasn't even Dakota Territory at the time probably, but grass was abundant and saddle high. It was those massive herds of buffalo, went through, grazed that land, urinated, put dung on the land, and then got off and didn't come back for a year or two or three, and we had this abundant resource. And generations, and I'm not criticizing the generations before us, but generations of season-long grazing got rid of the diversity, opened the bare ground, and took that resource down. We're just trying to do it now with fencing because we don't have 1 million head to do it. I just want to show you a bit on our ranch, and a couple of you have been here and you might have seen some of it. When I was a kid, there was no grass on those hills. This is just on the east side of the Missouri River, pretty sandy land. And there wouldn't have been anything. And a lot of bare ground. And then this is what we've done, and it's putting a lot of cattle on there, short duration, and get them off. That's big blue stem moving up those slopes, and I'll get folks say, what'd you plant that with? I go, oh, big John Deere air seeder. No, the seed bank was there. We just had to stimulate it. Mother Nature had to give us a little moisture, and then boom, and it exploded, and it covered those hills, and I didn't know that was possible. And then look, you bring this diversity back. That's purple prairie clover. You talked about spraying, and on one of the tours we were on, they talked about the stocker cattle, and they spray a lot down here, and that's fine, except they said, but our gains are dropping off. We're losing all our legumes. Well, I get it. That's why we're really careful about that, because we want these forbs, we want these legumes, we want the things in that vast diversity of native prairie, which I know there's not a lot when you go east, but we're very sacred to this native prairie. And then that's what we want it to look like when we're done. Whatever grass was still there is on the ground, the mineral cycle starts over. All of a sudden we can infiltrate, and when we're in areas like ours that don't get a lot of moisture, our biggest issue was we evaporated it all because of that bare ground, and now we don't. And now we're not putting it into the watershed, it's infiltrating. That's the goal in this. That was a little bit on, just flying through this like lightning speed here, but I want to talk a little bit about cover crops. I said, I don't ever want to feed a bale of hay to a cow in the northern plains. And we've done that. And when we can do it, it's $200 to $400 a head savings. That's bringing that profitability back. That's huge. But it's also the northern plains. And like this year, you got to throw all that out the window because it didn't work at all. But even if you can pull a month off, 2 months off, or whatever, it's huge for us. And it's using these cover crops on cropland. 3 goals: build your soil health back, which has been huge for us on depleted organic matter soils. And then get rid of those winter feed costs, because it's the #1 cost for all of us guys in this cow business. And then propagate wildlife. That's a huge thing. We run a hunting outfitting business, but even if you don't, it's a huge thing. Okay, that's what it looks like in a more normal year when we're grazing these things. We've grazed through 200-inch snowfall years. It just didn't come all at once like this year. And it didn't get so bitter that you couldn't even drive a 4-wheel drive tractor across that land, let alone try to graze it. So it does work, but you got to have a backup plan. You can't just go sell all the equipment. Well, you can, but you're going to have to buy it somewhere for a backup. But for you scientists out there, this is a huge deal, and you're way ahead of me, so I'm not going to try to outclass you on science here. But we test our biology all the time on these pastures. This is from having that livestock on the land, 23 species of cover crops on the land, all that manure and urine, and then all of a sudden your biology just goes through the roof. Almost 7,400 nanograms per gram of total biology in the soil. That was the highest test we'd ever had in North Dakota on this type of land at the time. It will fluctuate. It's not a perfect scenario, but the key is all of a sudden we're getting our ground back. We're building organic matter and we're making our ground work for us. And then this is what it looks like. One of the guys on one of the tours yesterday talked about worm counts. I was told by soil scientists because we're pretty sandy. It'll be really hard to get worms back in that sandy ground. It's too abrasive. And then when we pulled this up after a few years, we're like, wow, that's pretty cool and granulated. That's the soil we're trying to get, both on our rangeland and our cropland. And that's how we regenerate our natural resources and bring them back. And that's where we need you guys that are researchers, fill in the gaps for us guys that are applying and trying to make it work. We talked about water quality, and water quality is becoming a huge, huge thing. I was just on a panel in Billings, Montana. I gave the keynote there. And the guy that was on the panel with me is from Colorado. They're going to shut them down, irrigation. Too many big cities, they're going to lose it. And we better pay attention to this water quality. This is the Long Lake Creek, which goes through our ranch, ends up in the Missouri River. We better pay attention. What did we do? We fenced them all out. Doesn't mean we don't use them. We graze them very short, out. And then you have this beauty, and you have this wildlife, and then you can tell that story. And that's where we need to go. All right, and I'm going to finish this up because everybody always wants to know, because we have stacked a lot of enterprise to bring these kids back. And they always ask me, how do you bring your kids back? And I always say, create some excitement and then get the hell out of the way. And it's the truth. If you don't, they're not going to come. And I'm serious. But we've added diversity to the operation, trying to bring this next generation back. Again, improve our profitability and quality of life, and bring that excitement back again. So, we run a hunting outfitting business. You can Google it, Rolling Plains Adventures. It's been on many of the national hunting shows. Ducks, geese, pheasants, mule deer, white-tailed deer, and then we run a lot of cattle, but we also run a lot of buffalo. And so we do buffalo hunts. It's been a big addition to us. Lots of good folks, they want to hang a big buffalo bull on their wall, and they pay for it. And so it's added another little niche that I never knew we'd be doing. But it's actually kind of fun. Then we got into agritourism. This was a Sears and Roebuck kit house. This was after the sod house. There was one tiny house between this, and then this was the ranch house. Several generations. And when my boys got into this, I think we can tell the story of agriculture and have some events. And we need a place, and we're going to tear the ranch house down. And I said, whoa, so much history there. My dad was born on the kitchen table, died 80 years later, 5 feet away. You tear that down, all that history's gone. All the hired men that worked there, all the fun we had. So I talked them into it. They rebuilt it. It's a beautiful place, as you can see by this picture. And we have a lot of events there. It's hunting, it's corporate events, it's weddings. They also took a barn and made this. And so we've had Alan Savory actually come there and speak, and had 250, 300 folks learn. And so it's fun. We can do some things that a lot of people can't. And so we're trying to do our part to tell this story. Then when my youngest boy, who went to Montana State, came home, where do you fit? Well, he's the cowboy of the family, so we have our own meat label now. Both bison meat and beef, all grass finished, all source verified, all on that ranch. That's the story. You have to tell the story. The story is as important as the product, in my mind. And then if you'll notice, we put it right on there, preserving the prairie. The consumers need to know. And then my middle son, he was the rebel in the family that didn't go to a land grant, went to Arizona State. He said for academic purposes, and then I was reading that it was the #1 party school in the nation, so it made sense. Anyway, he worked for Anheuser-Busch, had it made in the corporate world. I never dreamed he'd come back, and then one day said, I'm tired of the traffic, tired of corporate America. And it was when InBev bought out Anheuser-Busch, he actually saw the writing on the wall. This isn't going to be the same family company that it was under the Bushes. He bailed out, came home, and he's the one that's in charge of the agritourism, but he had a dream to put the brewery in. And so we have our own beer that keeps us all sane, and we have fun with it all, and it's a good thing. But here's the biggest part of what we do. It's influencing policy and telling the story. We suck at it in agriculture. We literally do. And we get these people, we've had people from 40 foreign countries in all 50 states, and when they come, they say, agriculture is the problem. Ruining water, ruining the air, beat your animals, you can go down the list. And then when they see what we do and how we believe in these natural resources and improving it and helping the climate and all those things I think we can do, you talked about it, John, then they say, tell the story. And I take that challenge seriously, and we try to do it through everything we do. And then here's to the end, and this is what I believe in seriously. Soil health equates to healthy soil and water quality. And then which equates to forage health and animal health, which ultimately leads us to good human health. Our customers, that's what they're demanding. I think there's a vast growing segment of this population that wants that. If anything good came out of the pandemic, it's that we're not the healthiest society we thought. You talked about it. And I'm not trying to be critical. I'm saying we can do better, and that is where agriculture, I think, not only can we help the climate, but we can really help our population. And so that's the part that excites me, and I think those of you in the research world can help us along with that. So with that, thank you so much, and interested in be a part of the questions.
Jerry, you can keep that mic, and we'll just pass it from producer to producer. So part of the fun of this session, hopefully, is opening the field to questions from you guys, because this interaction of the back and forth, I think, is really important for everyone. So do I have an opening question? There we go.
Thank you all for being here and sharing your expertise with us. Could you speak a little bit to how you utilize cover crops and winter annuals throughout the year as part of your grazing system in the northern United States?
Well, I did some of that there, but when we first started with cover crops, and I'll be honest, this is 20-some years ago, we thought we had diversity, we had two. And it really didn't seem to be, I'm like, well, okay, what's the buzz? I don't get it here. It seems we had a lot of weed pressure. Well, that's how we sat down one day and we said, what do we want to do? And we came up with those 3 goals. That's what we wanted to do. And I'm happy to report on all 3 of those goals. Our organic matter's going like that. We have cut our feed costs down to, other than, this is an aberration year. I fed more hay in this year than I have in 5 years put together. So, and then on the wildlife, it's huge because we have that winter feed source and that cover. I'm a real believer in soil health and these cover crops, and we're using 23 different. That's not a secret great. I mean, don't hang your hat on 23. I don't care if it's 10 or 50. And find the mixes that work. Everybody wants my recipe. Well, it is what it is, but it's more the principle of it. Trying to get a lot of diversity. We put a lot of legumes in there. We don't ever fertilize our cover crops. If we get those legumes working, I'm trying to do this cheap. And last year we had our cover crop mix down to $20. Now seed has went a little goofy like everything else, so we'll probably be more 30, or maybe we'll even be higher. But if it gets too bad on one crop or another, I'll take some of those out and we'll redo the mix. So I don't know if I answered your question. I'm a firm believer in cover crops. I think it's one of the ways to get us to soil health. One more thing I would say, because we're losing our grassland at an astronomical number in North Dakota, and I think it's up and down the plains. There's only 25% left in North Dakota. I think we'll lose 10% more. The tremendous imbalance between crops, which the government has poured a lot of money in, and I'm just being honest. I'm not trying to offend anybody or say anything different, and that's not happening on the livestock side. We are slowly losing the livestock industry in North Dakota, and that's not just there. It's slowly, and it's a lifestyle thing, but people always ask, can I build soil health without livestock? And I go, yeah, you can make some difference, but you'll be 10 times slower. It's livestock that build these great systems, and they did it naturally. So,
does anyone else on the panel want to speak to cover crops?
We do cover crops, turnips, radishes, and it does two things. First of all, especially with those deep roots, as far as improving the organic matter deep down into the subsoil. So that works out well. And as the storm patterns were this year, they come across, it would hit Sacramento, that area, Central California, then come across the Rubies, hit us, then turn north, and then go up to North and South Dakota. And I know that the standing corn we left for the wildlife, that's what saved the deer on our place. And also, you build it, they'll come. If you have the habitat, the birds will come. There for a while, the only time you could see, for example, tundra swans was to go up to Jackson Hole, because that's where they were at the refuge. This last year, for the first year, we've got tundra swans, and we had enough forage out there for them, the corn and that sort of thing, that they stayed. And so there are great opportunities, not only for the soil, but for the animals, as far as the fall grazing and the early winter grazing, and also for the wildlife sustainment.
One of the beauties of coming to this conference is what the things you learn. And again, where my farm is located in Wisconsin, we're an hour south of Green Bay, an hour north of Milwaukee, and an hour northeast of Madison. So if you trifecta those three cities, and at that point you found our farm. We don't do much corn silage. We don't do a lot of winter wheat. I've been always trying to figure out how to do the cover crops on the soybean and the corn ground. I had the opportunity yesterday, and probably it was a real eye-opener, listening to Marianne, I forgot her last name, from Pennsylvania, that is planting cereal rye and growing corn. And that's one thing I'm taking out of this conference is, hey, Jared, let's get some cereal rye put into that corn this year for a cover crop. One of our goals is obviously to extend the grazing season as long as possible. Historically, we budget for 6 months of grazing, 6 months of winter feed, but if it's going to be a lot more profitable for our operation if we can extend that grazing season later in the fall, earlier in the spring.
Any more questions out there? Yep.
Living in the city, I hear quite often about how cows should be outlawed because they produce methane. I guess my direct question to you is, a show like Yellowstone helpful or hurtful to tell what's really going on in animal agriculture?
That's interesting. That's I think one of the things that we're constantly doing is trying to put out the forest fires, from the misconception that's thrown at us all the time. Talking about the methane producing I'm a Hereford breeder, and one of the things that the American Hereford Association is doing is a collaborative study with Colorado State University on trying to find the genetic link for methane producers. But the bottom line is one of our jobs is to maintain and manage a 40-gallon fermentation vat and try to get rid of that as much methane as possible. And it's going to be interesting coming on down the road. When you look at the University of California Davis study on feeding seaweed, which cuts methane production. But again, it's the misconception that's out there is just, and Jerry's talked about it as, hey, we just got to put we got to tell the story, and we're the four guys here trying to tell the story.
Yes, sir, I agree with what said here. I mean, it's just misconceptions of what's going on out there. On the ranch we do a little science, and we've discovered that 78% of the methane is produced by our wetlands in the wet season. You got microbial populations out there eating all that biomass and this, that, and the other. What are they producing? They're producing methane. So the cattle, and we've got non-grazed pastures, grazed pastures, the whole 9 yards, and shows that grazing cattle produce about 20 to 22% of the methane produced on the ranch. Now you flip the story to carbon sequestration. it's unbelievable on the grazing thing because it's regenerating. That grass is regenerating every year, and it's putting more and more carbon in the ground. So it's the balancing act. So, you know, our scientists said, hey, we're not going to go out there and tell everybody to dry up all the wetlands, are we? It's because it's about balance. Life is about balance, and everything we do in balance, we're okay. But once you get anything out of balance, we're in trouble.
I will tell you that on our ranch, we don't have a train station. I'm not sure. There's some of that. I mean, there's some authenticity to the movie. I have not really watched it to know exactly what all's going on, but you know, there's some authenticity to it. But still, at the same time, there's a lot of Hollywood. So don't believe everything you say or see.
I personally have sold a few cows to people who watched Yellowstone, but they didn't make it very long in the cow business. We got any more questions out there? Yep.
I'm a farmer from New Zealand, and I thought the four of you provided just an inspirational talk about particularly how you managed sensitive environments, and that gave me, and I know some of my Kiwi colleagues, hope that we can deal with the pressure around sensitive areas, and particularly water. The four of you are all involved with that, so thank you. That was great. My question is to Jerry around the biological test for soil. Is that a common thing? That was really interesting for me, so I'd be interested just how much that's used. And certainly it would be part of a good story.
Well, it depends on where you go in art. You know, there's not like there's a ton of us regenerative guys, but there's quite a few of us in North Dakota. There was kind of an epicenter in my county, if many of you know Jay Fear and others, that really embraced this sort of thing and took it on an international level a bit. And it's calmed down some, but some of us have really bought into trying to figure this soil health out. And we started to, and Jay helps me a lot on our place. And so we test every year. And it's not perfect. It's not like everything just goes up and you just go, God, I'm so dang smart, I'm doing everything right. You know, it's more like this, but generally going up. What was interesting that I could tell you is, so we've got some really depleted farmland. It should have never been broke in the first place. We're sandy. When I was a kid, it was wheat and summer fallow, and it eroded a lot and blew to South Dakota or wherever, you know. A lot of wind erosion, which we're seeing quite a bit again with some of the stuff that's being broke. But my goal was, could I bring the soil health back on these depleted lands? And so we put a cover crop in, and we saw a bump in this biology. And I said, what happens if you put it in another year, back to back? Bumped again. And so my point was, we were seeing that we were bringing that biology back. And then like the picture with the worms and the granulation in the soil, that would have never looked like that. You know, when you start this stuff, you should get pictures right away. So I can't show you the before and after, but I can certainly show you what a difference it makes. And the key to this is we're trying to build profitability back. When that biology goes like that, we all of a sudden can start cutting back if we're having to fertilize nitrogen. Because as you take, you know, a Haney test or whatever test you want that looks for the credits from the biology in the soil, we've run tests back to back and took leaf samples, and Mr. Fear did these, fertilized, this is not a pick on the university, but fertilized by university test, normal soil test, and then use the test that gives you credit for the biology and the respiration in the soil, and had the exact same yield. And I'm like, and again, it's not perfect, but even if you could cut it 50% one year or whatever, all of a sudden you start building profitability back. And you have the story to tell that, hey, we're not just pouring all kinds of stuff all over everything for something to do. I've spoken Iowa a couple of times. God bless you folks from Iowa. They're really on it. They want to change their soil health, and then I look out the window and there's algae growing on the pond. I said, why are you got the last 2 rows of corn damn near in the water? It's got nitrates all over it right now. I mean, I'm not picking on anybody. We've got to do a better job and then tell the story.
Remember what I said about sustainability and independence? Part of what needs to happen, and this is just like, say, for example, if you have a diesel engine and you give it a squirt of ether and it roars to life, then it dies back down again. A lot of times our commercial fertilizers, that's what they do. They go in, you get a spike, you get an explosion of growth, and then it dies right back down again. And so we have to wean ourselves away from that. Instead of having a spike, we have a more sustainable, regenerative type of production. And that's why, and that's driving us right now. If you look at the cost of nitrogen last year, it's come down this year, and so we have gotten away from the sulfates and the nitrates and the ureas, and we've gone back more into composting and biosolids and all of those types of things to get away from the spikes, which are not sustainable, and to get into more of a soil health which will regenerate itself, and then you have biological independence.
You know, regenerative agriculture is going to be the next big thing in agriculture in America. I think it's coming slow, but boy, I think it's just going to be, people are seeing the benefits of it. They're seeing that it's a more profitable way of farming their soil, and it also gives them a long-term deal of it. From New Zealand, I want to thank you guys for all your work on bringing all the fencing that we've done in the Midwest. If it wasn't for high tensile wire and your the fencing systems that you guys were pioneers in, I would have been out of farming a long time ago.
So, practical question for Jerry, and then I have a panel question. You showed those animals on native range in the wintertime, and I'm just wondering, any sort of protein supplementation, or how do you meet protein requirements for that?
Well, you bring up a great question, and early on I was really concerned. And I didn't have time to go into all that. First off, when you get into these grass-based systems, your cow type's probably not right. We have built a cattle industry on bigger and bigger and bigger and more inputted cows. And again, I'm not picking on anybody. If you can do all that on 2,000-pound cows, God bless you. I can't. So we had to bring our cow type down. We look for 1,100-pound cow in that range. They're not all perfect. Then we moved our calving back to May and June. I fought that for a big part of my life. I used to think it was fun, 3 o'clock in the morning, calving in a barn and pulling calves. I don't think that's that fun anymore. That was the number one biggest economic profitability decision I ever made, was moving that calving. And yet the hardest one. And so when you look at those things, then that helps you. And early on, we were careful about feeding these cover crops or grazing cover crops in that 3rd trimester because I was concerned. We used the nutritional balancer program out of Texas A&M. Most of you research guys are familiar with it. It's not a perfect system, but it gives you a snapshot if you're somewhat close. And anytime I've tested, I've never been under what I want. Now, I don't want to I'm not concerned of putting a bunch of weight on those cows, but I don't want them losing a bunch because they're going to get the green grass when they're calving. But the thing is, and here's the biggest, most important part of this story, where is every ranch headquarters built? It's on a waterway somewhere because the old timers put it on some kind of a creek or river or something. I never thought about that. That ends up in the Missouri River, ends up down here in the Gulf of Mexico. Maybe we should start thinking about that. And I never thought about it, but we never bring those cows in anymore. They'd be in a dry lot right on that creek, goes down the river. Never thought about it. Now we don't. We keep them on the land. Even if we have to supplement, we take hay out there, alfalfa cubes, whatever you want. You can mineral, So we're getting the benefit of soil health yet because we're keeping the cattle on the land. We've had the health department from North Dakota come to our place. and just they're in awe of it, because what do? We spend government money building berms to keep stuff out of the waterway when we could do it naturally that builds soil health and don't cost anybody money. You know, that's not the way we work in society, unfortunately, but I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, when you said range cubes and hay supplementation, that was really what I was asking, the kind of practical. So first of all, thanks all of you for telling your story. And I think, Jerry, your point of people come and they see and they think, well, there's no problems here after they hear your story. But that's not true for all producers in all systems. And I guess that's part of my question is, on the social side, you've found greater profitability. You've got your family back in the operation. There's a lot of people that can't claim that. And why does it not translate? What do we do to help other producers come along?
That is $1 million question. And that's why we're here. Obviously, we're trying to tell that story. It's why I go out and about. It's what motivates me and fires me up. Agriculture has blinders on, and part of it is multi-generational. You get so traditional, it's hard to change. And I don't mean this because my neighbors are great people, but they don't come to my place and look at what's happening. I might get some comment that, well, he's got them dumpy calves because they're 2 months later than theirs. Yeah, okay, I get that. That used to kind of bother me. It don't anymore. I'm profitable. I don't know if they are or not, but I know guys that aren't, and they're losing, you know, if they have land debt, they're going to lose their place. If they have it all paid for, they might sneak through. So, but that's the problem in agriculture. You guys need to help that a bit, honestly. Universities have got to help that. I just got done with my term as North Dakota Grazing Lands president. We never had a really good relationship with North Dakota State. We're trying to improve that. We're in the same deal. We got to be together, and not that we have all the answers, but we got to have some give and take and come and let's work together. We don't have that very good. Some parts of the country really do and others don't, and I think we've got to bridge that. I really admire that you guys stayed here. I mean, a lot of people are on the airplane going home. I get that, and I'd like to get there too, but we have to talk. So
one of the great benefits that National Cattlemen's Beef Association is doing is this Environmental Stewardship Award Program. That's what it's all about. They go out and you make application, you get nominated, you get selected, and then you have a big reception. They just finished one in D.C. where we had all of the influencers, the policymakers come and they see these videos, they see the story. But like you said, the greatest challenge we have in the ranching industry is tradition. We've always calved at this time. We've always used this breed of cattle. We've always raised our cattle this way. This is because this is the way it is. And you get that romance that's out there. And so you've got to fight that. I had a neighbor ask me one time, says, how can I get my calves to look like yours? I said, well, first of all, you need to get your grass to look like mine if you want your calves to look like mine. I mean, that's just the way it is. They don't see that. The buckaroos, nothing against those guys that wear the stovetop boots, and I think they go to bed with their spurs on, but they have the Zorro hats and that sort of thing. They go out and they look at the cattle. They could care less about the range. The rancher looks at the grass first, and then he looks at the cattle. Because if you look at the grass and you see what the grass is doing, I can tell you what the cattle are going to be doing.
I'd agree with that. It's all about, again, I'm going to go back, I'm kind of a stickler on balance. If you don't have the grass, your cattle ain't going to make it. I mean, that's it. I mean, we've changed our breeding season. We're in a state that we freight everything out. We're an export state. So, you know, we market our calves. We built calving season on market. And it's not always the best thing because a lot of times our falls are tough. We're dry in the fall, and then we get wet in the summer. So if you balance it out, sometimes a high dollar market, you're hurting yourself trying to get a heavy calf to get to a marketplace because we're coming from a tropical environment, subtropical, where most of the calves are coming from. They're going to Panhandle, Texas, Kansas, and if we don't get those calves out of there June, July, and August, and mid-September, and we might as well tell them the truth, you get calves out of the southeast and get them to the west, in the death month of October, you're in trouble. So what we've done, we've changed our breed. We actually have a split breeding season. And so that's how actually has helped us increase our production by splitting that season. We have a fall and a spring, still kind of balance it out. And I'm probably the world's worst about giving a cow a chance when I say it's my fault. We don't feed, we supplement. So we try to balance what our grass is not doing, and it's a balancing act. So that's kind of where we're at. And if you start looking at costs, freight is a big deal today. It used to cost us, about 6 cents a hundred to get them out west. So you're talking about $9-10 a head, and it's well above $60-70 a head now. And so freight's a big deal for us. So
tradition is the number one stumbling block in agriculture. Just because Dad did it one way and Grandpa did it the same way, are you going to change? It's tough, I look at the cow as its changing role. When I got out of college in 1973, everything was what can we do for that calf? I think the cow's role has changed. I think we have to look at it as a cow right now as an organic lawnmower. The biggest job of this cow is going to be taking that grass from 12 inches to 4 inches, and then we'll find another pasture to move it in. And the byproduct's going to be the calf, that high density, high quality beef. But it's going to be a product. But we're going to keep on stimulating photosynthesis by keeping this grass fresh, and we're going to be sequestering carbon. That's that whole role of that cow is going to change. Now we're going to argue all day what kind of cow is. Jerry down there, the good-looking Jerry, said that let's get these cows at 1,100 pounds. And he's probably right. Let's moderate these cows. But there's other factors and other things that we have to consider. So it's a very good question. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate you sharing your stories. For scientists, researchers, and extension specialists, I think it's important for us to talk to each other. It's important for you all to talk together and to hear different stories. Thanks for sharing with us what your concerns are. And hopefully, and I heard a lot about how you appreciate research. So my question would be, what in fact, for those that have had research on the farm, what's kind of like the most valuable research portion that has helped you, but also what would you like in the future as far as a research agenda? Thank you.
Very good question. Thank you. I'll start it off by I think all these gentlemen up here have said that, hey, we're looking to you guys to help fill the blanks for what we're doing out here. For the longest time, it's been hard to get some research on grazing. And finally, that's coming about, and I'm very appreciative of seeing what's going on at this conference. What can you do for future research? That's a good question. I think you got to keep talking to us and seeing what our problems are, and designing projects that will benefit us. And I think that would probably be the best way to go. But yes, I think that we have to continue this collaboration between us guys and you guys.
Well, I kind of look at it in a sense that, the science is there to protect us, to keep us kind of sometimes out of, but I think we got to look at it in optimization. If we went back to 1950, when fertilizers really hit the market, they were cheap. We probably did over-fertilize, and we done things out of balance. But I think, like in our country down there, we've got if you have a lot of introduced grasses, they're highly dependent on a lot of inputs. And so and if you spend $200-300 an acre planting a tame forage to grow a pasture, and if you don't fertilize it, you're going to lose it. So I would say how the research that needs to come is, how do you do that balancing act? How do you optimize a grass in that type system? In our natives, if we went back to open range and we opened it up to where you could graze the area, like our wetlands, our marshes are wet in the summer, so we don't have cows there. So we let that stockpile. That's our stockpile forage for the winter. We rotate back in there usually around November, December if we don't have a late hurricane. So we balance it out. So I think looking at the research world is how do we optimize our production? And I think we could all, I mean, in our country we can't have a cow bench bigger than about 12,000 pounds, really 1,100, but we know what the marketplace is asking for. You got packers now asking for 900-pound carcasses. That don't, equate for my cow size, but I mean, I think we can produce the same calf that goes to the marketplace and balance our production on the ranch to sustain. I don't know if we'll ever be able to maintain 900-pound carcasses on a graze-based system. And then also looking at the things, how can we better utilize the forages that we do have out there, like these men are already pointing out on their places, and replicate that in a mass scale.
I'm going to change my hats for a minute from a rancher's hat. I sit on the board of trustees at Utah State University. I'm also an adjunct professor. Somebody asked me, you came back to the university. I say, well, I never left the university. To me, education is a process. It's not an event. Yes, I got my degree, but at the same time, I'm continually learning. There's that ongoing process of knowing what is the next best mousetrap that's out there. And so one of the things I will tell you, wearing my trustee hat, looking at, and I work with all of the different colleges at the university, one of the things that you have to be careful about is making sure you don't create a research vacuum. And you see some of that goes along. I'll give you an example. Say, for example, about the genetically modified organisms, where we take, ask Monsanto. They did all of this wonderful scientific work, but they forgot to bring the consumer along with them. And so when they have all of this revolutionary technology coming out, and then, everything that's on the internet is gospel truth, isn't it? Yes, it is. If you read it there, it's got to be the truth, and so all of a sudden they get attacked. And so it doesn't matter whether it's BST or GMO, you have that movement that's out there that's saying it's not good for you. And so you have to be careful that you can, as we say on the ranch, getting the hay down to the cows. There's always that tug-of-war between what we call at the university the gene jockeys and the applied. And the two need each other. And so you have to be careful in your research that you're always asking, how is this going to help the environment? How is this going to help the producer? How is this going to help the consumer? Because when you lose her trust, meaning the consumer, she's not going to buy your product. I don't care what it is that you're trying to sell. In our case, it's beef. And so if she doesn't trust the quality and the soundness of the production system, she's going to be suspicious of that. And so we're always in that tug of war. There are those out there that are suspicious of what we do, the factory farms and all of that sort of thing. And so we need you to supply the data and the information to make us better, to help her feel good about what she's buying at the grocery store.
Well, much like John, I spent half my life in this research agenda. I was North Dakota State, or North Dakota is the only state to my knowledge, it was that way anyway. We have the State Board of Ag Research and Education. We have 10 producers that have fiscal authority over all extension and research in the state. I was one of the ones that lobbied for it, and we got it, and I was the first chair, and it scared the hell out of NDSU. But honestly, it's a good thing. I mean, we have to listen to you as researchers. You need to listen to us as the practical producers, and hopefully we build a better program for the producer and the taxpayers of the state. It's not perfect, but it's a good thing. So I'm 100% behind all of you guys. We've done some SARE grants on our place, studying the impact of shorter grazing on cover crops, longer grazing. Did it make a difference on this whole soil health? I think there's huge room in this arena on this biology, and we're just scratching the surface, and we're all trying to demonstrate and learn as we go, but we could fill in some real gaps on, and maybe let us jump ahead a little quicker on what's happening, what can we do different, what would make sense. The thing that always and it's always frustrated me with research, and I get it, we have to get baseline and things, but we tend to forget the profitability side. And for guys like me, that's our number one goal because we didn't have it for so long. And how do we relate this back, and how do we get that practical side? The last thing I would say is sometimes in research, we're so gung-ho about doing it on research ground or whatever. Like these SARE grants, why not come to guys like me and partner, and you don't have all the expense. We're already doing the system. Just study it, and let's, I know you got to replicate, I know, and it's a little more work for us, but let's figure that out and let's partner together. I think it gives you credibility, and it cuts your expense bill a lot if we can help you with our resources. So again, we have got to partner better. We're not. We tend to sometimes, academia's over here, we're over here, and we're like shooting at each other, and that's the dumbest thing ever. We need to fix that.
We've got about 5 minutes for this last question, and then I've got a parting question before we conclude this section.
Thank you very much to the panel. It's quite obvious to me that you all manage grass or forage, as a crop and do so very well. We have a problem in the UK where, certainly where I live and where Lisa's from, we can grow grass and farmers don't value it. To give you an example of this, we both made the comment when we saw a paper presented by someone from the UK. We don't get that at home. We've had to come to the States for it. How do you get your fellow ranchers to listen to the message to improve your grassland? For us, it will be grassland. For you, your rangelands.
I'm going to go back to the ESAP program because all of those have been recognized on the region, the national winners. Their place is showcased. And they're the messengers, they're the missionaries. And so it's you invoke the peer pressure principle. And so I know what you're saying as far as, because a lot of people, producers out in the ranching world or the farming world, they say, well, you're in a university. You really don't know what's going on, okay? You're just up there and don't have a relationship. And so that's why you find and you try to identify those producers who are more progressive, who will listen, and get them to be your missionaries. Get them to proclaim the gospel of what you're trying to do, of improved agriculture. I mean, they're the vehicle. Okay, they're not going to listen to you. You need to understand that. They're not going to listen to you, but they're going to listen to their neighbor.
It is interesting, I was going to try to get down to this conference earlier, but a Japanese delegation came to our farm, and we had to show them around. These were from the food service industry of Japan. They were all from Tokyo. One of the fellows was head chef at the Wolfgang Steakhouse in Tokyo, Japan, I believe. And these guys were never on a farm in their life, So it all goes back to what they want. They want a very palatable, nutritious product, but they also want to know where it's coming from. And it all goes back to, hey, we got to keep on telling the story, and we got to keep on pounding. But we have to have this collaboration from us to you to the consumer. That hey, what we're doing here is going to save the planet. We are not the problem. We are part of the solution.
In UK, do you have like stocker associations and things like that, farmer associations and stuff like that? Just like John said, somebody has to get out there and do it, and sometimes it's, go on and just continue to say the same message or different message in some cases. I think we're all a lot different than some of our colleagues in the ranching business because we do things differently. I mean, when I tell somebody I got a spring calving season in Florida, they go, "You're nuts. What are you doing?" But it's proof in the pudding when you show there's more calves on the ground, and it's about coupons. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't have to sell a calf. I can then turn a calf into a feeder, market him at a different time of year. There's just things that you can show that, and it's by communicating and getting a message out by, like John said, other neighbors.
It's not all perfect here either, believe me. And I'd like to challenge everybody from our country, because this grassland thing is we're losing it, and we better wake up. I was in a Senate hearing in North Dakota when the head, and he's my friend, but the head of the grain growers stood up in front of the hearing and said, grassland is just wasteland, and the only way to save the producer is to fill it with wind towers. I tried to catch him on the way out the door, and then somebody grabbed me to ask a question, and he's my friend, but I literally wanted to say, have you ever thought of doing something else? You just embarrassed me. I'm serious. But when we can't even get our grain groups to think that grassland has a value, we have a problem. So the Grazing Coalition, what we're trying to do, and we've been, we were in Washington for the ESEP award, but I spent some time with our congressman, Senator Hoeven, sits on the appropriation for the Farm Bill. He has some clout, and I'm trying to get this message that this is important. Grassland is important. Wake up. And if we don't, we're going to lose it. And the message we're trying to get across is get the public on our side, because with grassland loss, and if we lose the livestock industry, the wildlife are gone. And that the public does not want to happen. We've got to get that message. We need you folks to reinforce that. We don't have a unified message. The senator said to me, our calf comes in here, tells us one thing, NCBA tells us something else. I'm just being honest here of just exactly what they say. We don't have a unified message. But when the crop guys come in, the fertilizer guys are there with them. The God bless Corteva, they're my greatest friends, but they're there with them. And they do a lot for us too, I'm not trying to, I'll pick a fight before I'm done. I don't mean to. But their lobby is so huge, and we're so fragmented, and yet we're not getting that message across. But he's right. NCBA has taken this award to new levels, but we're not near far enough yet. And it's not just that award, it's telling that story. It's what motivates us on our place, and we have the facility to do it. I absolutely love that part. Tell the story and tell people and make them understand how damn important this grassland is. And we haven't even talked about carbon sequestration and our benefit to the climate and all that stuff that can happen and be good. And once it's gone, it's gone. I mean, yeah, you can get back halfway, but it won't be the same. So my challenge to you is go back and say, how do we work with the grazing coalitions? How do we work with producers? How do we tell the public? What's the university's message on the importance of grassland? A lot of times it's pretty quiet. Yeah, that's got to stop. Honestly, it's got to stop.
We're up against our time limit, but we're going to squeeze in one more question.
Thank you. I enjoyed every one of your talks. I hope everybody in this room takes that message and goes out in 100,000 different directions with it. I retired from Texas Tech. One comment that was made that I would like to comment on is that you can't do research on producer sites because you have to have replication. That is not true. I did research the whole time I was at Texas Tech with producers. They are not replicated because they can't be replicated. You have a unique system. It is unique to you, to that location, to that environment, to that soil, to your animals. Every part of that is unique. You can't replicate that. What you can do is accept that it is a system. It functions as the interactions of the whole thing. And you study that and you learn why. Why do you get this result when you, the producer, does this or doesn't do that? That's where the learning comes from. That's where the transferable information comes from. And for those of you that are at universities and work with statisticians, it works because every site is the whole system. You've got the whole population. There aren't any systems and replications. You've got it. You've got the entire population can't talk, population in your hands, and you can statistically analyze that. We've done it, we've published it. We worked with a group of producers in the high plains of Texas where the water's running out and the cotton's in trouble, and the cattle industry's the other half of the story out there. And everything you've said, it resonates with what they're finding out there. You take that livestock out, and that system's going faster than ever because it can't exist without that. That was a natural grassland. So those producers, we met with them when we wanted to start working with them because of all the reasons you all have said. And they sat around and they were concerned about exposing what they were doing to other eyes for scrutiny, afraid they'd get in trouble. And at the end of the day, they went around and every single one of them said, we want to cooperate. We'd rather be part of finding the solution than waiting until we're told what we have to do. And they're still there, and it's almost 15 years later, and there's a tremendous benefit that comes out of this. So you are right. You have said the right things. We have to listen, and we have to do things differently.
Thank you.
Great comment. And on our way out here, I have a question for the panel as well. So in just a word or a couple words, what do you think your greatest challenge will be in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think one of the greatest challenges that all producers have, if you look at the average age of those in the beef industry, farmers, ranchers, it's like 60 plus. There's going to be a lot of transition take place in the next 10 to 15 years. Where is the next generation coming from? Who's going to take my place? And what's going to happen? The thing that I see in my neck of the woods is farms that have been there for over 100 years, and all of a sudden the next generation is not there. And so it gets split up or sold off. Or when the patriarch passes away, all of the siblings come back and they want their piece of the action. And so this transition from this generation to the next generation is going to be a great challenge. And you're going to see a lot of that taking place. So that would be what I'm looking at. The other thing is middle management. The MBAs, the CPAs are a dime a dozen, but we need to find more of those that have that business acumen, that know the difference between wheat and barley, a steer and a heifer. And that is a rare commodity to find. Those are the two challenges I see going forward.
Well, I agree with John. The transition's a challenge. We've got 3 boys on the ranch, but it's a family. It's challenging. And that whole issue, and how do we make it work? And then the other biggest issue, I think, if we can make that work, and hopefully we keep these ranches in the hands of families. We see it way too much, nothing against corporate America or the big guys, but they're owning more and more agriculture. And for a guy like me, if I didn't have kids come back and I want to sell it out to somebody with a whole lot of money, I get it, because you'll get paid the most. But that isn't what we really want in this industry. The other thing is the government's involvement in this. This whole climate issue, and Senator Hoeven told us this, if you want to make change, the folks from the city that are on the farm committee, it's all got to be about climate, because that's what they want. So how do we fit into that? My fear is they will mess this all up. We're the guys that sequester carbon. We're the guys that could make a big difference without spending trillions. Maybe incentivize us and help. But my fear after being there and talking to them and listening to them, this could be all out of shape, and agriculture does not fit at all, and we continue to lose grasslands and we continue to lose our livestock industry. That is the biggest challenge, I think, in this country right now. And there's a whole lot of folks that don't want animals on the land. And you said it. If I never remembered anything else from Alan Savory, he said exactly what you said. You take the cattle off the land, you will desertify, the country will become hungry, and will shoot each other over food. And, you know, he's a big picture guy, but he says that every time I'm around him. And it's true. But most people don't understand that. So it's that government how do we make them do the right thing in this? You folks in the universities carry a lot of clout, and I know you can't lobby. They always told me that when I was chair of SBER, which we lobbied every day, but you didn't tell anybody that. But you can give information and provide that of how important this is.
There's no doubt rural prosperity. As a society, as I come to these big cities and things, you know, the cities will not exist without agriculture. Again, I'll go back to that open space. And that's one thing, the folks who run around this city don't eat if there's nobody out in agriculture. So we have to support these rural communities and help them up. I mean, we've been working for years without, I guess it's a dirty word these days about profit. Profit is just what you can do more with expanding, growing, and being resilient in what you do. When you're broke all the time, you cannot do the things that we all want to do. So as a society, I think we've got to recognize that we have to support agriculture, no matter where we are at in the world. We've got to protect our waters, we've got to protect our land, and it all is in a balanced act to support one another. So that's kind of where I look at it.
Society challenges to follow is the biggest problem with it. And to follow up with Gene's comment here, urbanization is eating up. What is it? I saw 2,000 acres a week or something in America. That's the last crop in Wisconsin is when they plant a house on that acre, and it's a challenge. Obviously, when you're changing the land use, obviously I cannot expand my operation if they're going to if urbanization keeps on moving out into the country, and it's moving. And I see that as a challenge. And also the other big challenge from society is how they're going to try to dictate on how we farm. Are we using the best practices possible? And that's always going to be a challenge.
Let me thank once again Grace Vahey. Thank you so much for getting everyone here, and a National Cattlemen's Beef Association also for sponsoring this event. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Great discussion. Thank you so much.